Unlike real gold, kids raised as golden children never turn out to be as pure as their parents see them. Growing up, my sister, Jess, always got her way. No matter how nasty or irrational she acted towards me, she always got away with it. That was because she was the golden miracle child. What aided this was that my sister was stunningly beautiful. She had thick, curly hair and light eyes, while I had dark eyes and straight hair. My mom spent a lifetime comparing our looks. After we became teenagers, my mom constantly told me to dress like my sister or asked her to teach me makeup. But my sister would bully me and make fun of me if I ever asked for help. This caused deep resentment between us. My sister latched onto the worst traits we saw in my mother, while I rejected them entirely. Being put on a pedestal for her looks turned my sister into a self-centered person who thought she could get away with anything. My mom's constant comparisons led to my self-esteem issues. As an adult, I became quiet and reserved. Some people even called me a pushover. Recently, I started therapy to build a stronger backbone. It's been hard standing up for myself in relationships, but I feel the way my family treated me left lasting scars, making it hard for me to maintain healthy friendships or romantic relationships. My sister even slept with my boyfriend Tony in high school. When my parents found out, they told me to let bygones be bygones. My sister wasn't even reprimanded. That was when I truly realized how much they preferred her over me. The way my dad stood by and watched my mom emotionally wear me down made me feel like no man would ever stand up for me or see my worth. It's hard for me to trust or connect in relationships. But being the ugly sister, growing up did have one silver lining. I had zero social life and spent all my time studying. I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA and earned a full ride to my top university. The night before I started high school, my mom told me she was paying for my sister's college, but that I'd have to go to community college and pay my way. I remember sobbing and asking her why she didn't love me like she loved my sister. She insisted she did but claimed my sister deserved it more as the firstborn. When I landed my scholarship, I was overjoyed and excited to share the news with my family. But when I told them, my dad simply said, "Good job," and my mom didn't even look up from her phone. She ignored me for a week. When I asked why she was mad, she avoided eye contact and left the room. That night, I realized how alone I truly was. My mom hated me, and my sister reveled in it. That night, I wrote in my journal until sunrise. I decided to redirect my rage into academic success. I wouldn't beg for their love anymore. I'd give myself what they couldn't: stability, independence, intelligence, and education. And I did just that. I graduated with honors, got a fantastic position at a company I interned for, and have been making six figures since I turned 24. When I told my family about my accomplishments during holidays, my mom either ignored me or redirected the conversation. For example, during Christmas dinner, my uncle congratulated me on a promotion and asked about my plans to buy my first house. My mom interrupted, saying, "This is boring. Can we change the conversation?" Under her breath, she muttered, "It's probably not even true anyway." I eventually purchased my first house and posted about it on social media. Everyone in my family liked the post, except for my mom. I suspected her resentment was because my sister's life was a complete opposite of mine. My sister went to college with my parents footing the bill but ended up failing out and getting pregnant by her first college boyfriend after only 4 months of knowing him. My parents likely asked her to terminate the pregnancy, but she kept the baby. She tried to make the relationship work, but it was toxic. Despite this, they had another child. Meeting her baby's father at family gatherings confirmed he was as awful as she was. He barely remembered my name and never contributed anything to holiday meals. Every year, he would bring home trays of food as if he were taking inventory. My sister and I barely spoke as adults. During the few times we did, like at family holidays, she would make nasty comments about my weight or outfits, clearly projecting her own insecurities. I wore designer clothes, and she constantly accused me of carrying fake designer purses. One Thanksgiving, the moment I walked in the door, she looked me up and down and said, "I see you're dressed up again like the stuck-up B***age you are." It was so uncalled for. She even insulted me in front of her kids, using curse words despite their young age. I don't feel bad saying this. My sister is pure trash. That's why I don't regret what I did after she dumped her kids on me one morning without warning. It was a peaceful Saturday morning when my doorbell rang. To my shock, I found my sister's 10 and 7-year-old sons standing on my porch with overnight bags. They said their mom told them I'd be babysitting because she was going on vacation for 8 weeks. I hadn't spoken to my sister since the 4th of July barbecue, where she mocked me for eating too much. Confused, I let the boys in and called my sister repeatedly. When she finally picked up, I demanded she come get her kids. I told her that if she didn't, I'd call CPS. She responded coldly, threatening to call my job and lie about me being unmedicated for bipolar disorder to get me fired. Knowing my career was my lifeline, I hung up, panicking. I realized I had to figure out a plan. I called my mom for help, knowing full well she'd side with my sister. As expected, She guilt-tripped me, saying I never helped my sister and should be there for her just this once. Furious, I screamed, asking her to name a single time my sister had ever been there for me. She ignored the question and lectured me about family obligations. Eventually, I convinced her to come to my house, hoping she could take over babysitting duties while I left for my long-anticipated trip to Australia to meet my boyfriend's family. My mom arrived and immediately made me feel like an outsider in my own home. She defended my sister's actions, saying I was being difficult. When I pressed for the truth about my sister's vacation, my mom finally admitted my sister wasn't on vacation. She was visiting a sugar daddy overseas. I laughed in disbelief, but my mom remained stone-faced. I couldn't handle her defense of my sister anymore and demanded she leave. When she refused, things escalated. She shoved me into a coffee table, breaking a vase my boyfriend had gifted me. I broke down, screaming and crying until she finally left. My nephews overheard the commotion and timidly asked if everything was okay. Seeing their nervous faces broke my heart. I decided to make them as comfortable as possible, ordering pizza and letting them watch movies late into the night. After they fell asleep, I called my boyfriend to vent. He suggested I secretly record my sister making threats for evidence. It was genius. The next day, I called my sister again. Staying calm, I guided the conversation toward her blackmail threats, and, predictably, she repeated them. She ranted that I didn't deserve my job and would be exposed as crazy. Her words hurt, but I focused on securing the recording. Once I had it, I hung up. The following morning, I contacted CPS, explaining the situation and sharing the recording. The agent was sympathetic and assured me they'd launch an investigation. It was a small relief, but I was still on edge. My nephews deserved better than this mess. The next morning, my sister showed up at my house with my mom and a giant man who spoke only Russian. Before I could react, he shoved me to the ground and barged in. My nephews ran out of their room, confused and scared. The man grabbed them while I screamed for them to stop. When I tried to intervene, he threw me into the wall. As they dragged the boys out, my nephews cried, begging to stay with me. My sister barked orders at the man, who tossed the boys into a car. Before leaving, she spat in my face. It was one of the most degrading moments of my life. After they left, I collapsed sobbing. I called the police and provided every detail I could remember, including the license plate of the SUV. Hours later, the police informed me they had located the car. Both my sister and the man were arrested after a violent confrontation with officers. The police informed me that my sister had used her one phone call to try to reach me. I refused to speak to her. Let her rot in jail, I thought. However, my nephews were placed in CPS protective custody, and I wasn't allowed to contact them. This was heartbreaking. I missed them terribly and hated the thought of them being with strangers. The next day, I went to the police station to press charges against my sister and my mom for breaking into my home. I was adamant about holding them accountable. While at the station, I learned that CPS's investigation was still ongoing. Frustrated by the slow progress, I left with a mix of determination and sadness. Weeks turned into months, and I kept calling CPS daily for updates. My life became a waiting game, with every moment consumed by worry for my nephews. I began thinking seriously about seeking custody of them. They deserved stability, and I knew I could give them a loving home. Before I could file for custody, I had to deal with my sister in court for her criminal charges. When the day arrived, it was the first time we had seen each other since the traumatic incident at my house. The last interaction we'd had was her spitting in my face, so the tension was palpable. During the trial, the judge mentioned my intention to seek custody of my nephews. My sister, who hadn't been informed, erupted in rage. She screamed my name and lunged at me in the courtroom. She clawed at my face and tried to rip out my hair before the bailiff restrained her. In the scuffle, she bit my forearm so hard that it became infected later. Her violent outburst only strengthened my case against her. Over the next 2 years, my sister racked up numerous charges, ultimately leading to a life sentence. My mom avoided prison by testifying against her, a betrayal that finally shattered their toxic bond. With my sister incarcerated, I shifted my focus to the custody battle for my nephews. It wasn't easy. My nephew's biological father and his family also sought custody, which prolonged the process. Despite the stress and expense, I refused to give up. Those boys deserved a stable, loving home, and I was determined to provide it. After nearly 2 years of court proceedings, I was awarded full custody of my nephews. The day I brought them home was one of the happiest of my life. I had decorated their rooms with care, filling them with their favorite colors, toys, and posters. When my nephews saw their rooms, their faces lit up with joy. My youngest nephew ran to show me his rediscovered Nintendo Switch, and I surprised him with his favorite plush dog, which I had kept safe. He fell into my arms, crying tears of happiness. My oldest nephew joined us, wrapping his arms around me tightly. "I knew it, Auntie," he said through tears. "I just knew you would come back for us." In that moment, every sleepless night and every painful memory was worth it. I had finally provided them with the safe, loving home they deserved. As we settled into our new life together, I vowed to give them the love and stability I never had growing up. Despite the scars left by my sister and mom, I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. I had turned my pain into purpose, and my nephews became my family in every sense of the word.